Hi, welcome to the Authentic Woman You Are Summit, and I'm Jennifer Ackad. I'm your host and the creatrix of that series. Today we have Anita DeFrancesco with us, and hi Anita.
Hello, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for being with us.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here to share my talents and my inspiration for your audience.
Thanks. So Anita, you are the founder of Tantra Wisdom, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself to the audience.
I'm Anita DeFrancesco, and I am a psychotherapist and a sex educator, sex and intimacy, modern sex and relationship coach is what I call myself. I came up with the word Tantra Wisdom a very long time ago. I thought when I was growing up, the word wisdom tended to stay in my mind because maybe I have an old soul inside of me, and that's what I started to come in contact with, this old soul that was in me. So wisdom is where the word Tantra, how I came up with Tantra Wisdom. But what I do is I'm based in Philadelphia and Los Angeles, and I work with couples, workshops, different people that have working with people with their body armor, their emotional intimacy, intellectual intimacy, and aligning and connecting, teaching people how to really live free and how to liberate and recreate the life they have. Because sometimes we just stay connected to our pain. And that's my job, to help you get out of that.
Thanks. And all right, so let's start with your own personal journey. You know, how this tapping into the wisdom of the body started with you. When you were a kid, you mentioned to me that you got very sick. So I would love for you to share about, you know, what you went through as a kid and the awarenesses that came through and how you got out of it.
Well, when I was a child growing up in Philadelphia, I was 9 years old, and I had, which was a very debilitating disease in the 60s. It was 1966. And I had rheumatic fever, rheumatic heart disease. And this put me out of school for a year, which means when you're in the fourth grade, it's a time of bonding with other children, an opportunity that I didn't have. And I went into a hospital, and I had to stay there for 6 months. So essentially, I was homesick for an entire year, but 6 months in a hospital. And when I was in this hospital, I witnessed a lot of children dying, and I witnessed a lot of heart disease that they couldn't fix then. We have come so much further in medicine these days, but a lot of children were dying because there wasn't enough medicine for this type of heart disease. And I was one of those kids that I really wanted to live, even though I didn't have such a really good upbringing. My parents, there was a lot of abuse in the home. Perhaps being in that hospital gave me the sense of life, being away from the home life where there was abuse going on. So I didn't have to deal with that at 9 and 10 years old. I was in the hospital. I was away from the family. So I cultivated this inner wisdom, and I started to become friends with a lot of my hospital mates and opening my heart to my feelings. And once I opened my heart to my feelings, I started to love myself, because I knew that my parents couldn't. They were having a lot of psychological issues, and I wasn't there, thank goodness, with all the abuse, that at least those 6 months. But when I was in this hospital, there also were a lot of children that had come from a lot of abusive families. And in fact, it was 1966. I was the only white person, white Caucasian, amongst African Americans, a time when we didn't come together then, when racism was really, especially in Philadelphia. So we weren't allowed to play together then. So I reached out to my hospital mates, which they were all African American. It was the first year in that hospital that the numbers were just off like that, you know, and they had a boys' wing and a girls' wing. And so I reached out to my hospital mates, and I wanted to be friends with them. And I needed to be friends with another heart, because the heart is what connected me to my own heart and my own feelings and how I was able to heal. Essentially, a lot of those kids did die, and I was the only one who lived. And I thought that was a miracle on my part. And it was my very first awakening, not my first awakening, but we'll say my most profound awakening, that I was conscious enough and old enough, 9 years old, to or at least realize what was happening. So this is where I connected to saving myself, opening the heart to the feelings, moving my body. I couldn't get out of bed for 6 months, in a bed, ice packs at night, ice tubs. When you have rheumatic fever, kids don't get that anymore today. So that was my profoundness. And when I came home and went to school, all the kids they didn't know me, because fourth grade is the year that you bond. So naturally, I was the outsider. But I had cultivated love for myself, so I was never really alone.
Yeah,
And
so it's really, this is how your path to self-love started, and a connection. I hear the word connection a lot in everything that you're saying, the importance of connection.
when I witnessed the other children dying, I mean, body bags, it was almost like when one suffers, we all suffer. That was something that came into my head. When one suffers, this took away, if any, there was a lot of prejudice going on at that time in the world, as there is all the time. But back then in the 60s, especially in Philadelphia, I learned to rise above any prejudice that would come my way. My friends were my African-American kids that were in the hospital. But like I said, a lot of them did die. Something came into me, I wanted to live, but I didn't want to go back home to my parents because they fought. There was so much confusion in their lives. But when I got out, I was able to, as I got older, to understand them and help them as a result of this experience. And when the spirits came into me to help me open my heart to my feelings and connect to my own love, and there my heart continued to beat and beat, the heartbeat in my head, the heartbeat in my head. So I mindfulness and connecting the mind to the body is how I saved myself. And I'll never forget the very last day I was in that hospital. I went to one girl, one of the hospital mates that I was with, and she was one of the last. And I hugged her goodbye, and at that moment she died right in my arms. What a profound life experience for a child to have, and have to grow.
She died in your arms?
Yes, literally. This was one of the kids that it was asthma and rheumatic fever. Asthma children were all they would move them to Arizona back then, but now it's different. Arizona is not the place to go if you have asthma, because everything has changed within our climate and the plants. But it was a time where the kids could live, and they would send them, their parents would have to move them to Arizona if they wanted to live. But now,
so very very intense and profound experience for a kid at such a young age.
Well, imagine children growing up in Afghanistan in a war. It's the same kind of thing that we're seeing today, or immigrant children that are, facing all of these problems, and their parents are trying to save them. But I think of myself almost like a little kid when I see a lot of these war movies, and I think of myself as a kid that grew up in that same mentality, but just in a safe place like a hospital in the United States where there weren't any guns.
And this propels you on your path, right? From very young, you understood that love was the key to something.
Well, the reason I understood love is because I needed the love to live. And I believe that was my first Tantra experience, that most people think Tantra is sex. I mean, love, sex is love. It's not sex. It's just a word, it's love. So for me, I felt like that was my first Tantric experience of opening my heart. And that is how I got into all of the path I'm on, and teaching and wanting to learn more about love, and teaching people that you really can open your heart to your feelings. And I needed these other people. So I reached out to them on some subconscious level, and a physical level. And it was like who's coming to dinner back in 1966 when we got out of the hospital, the ones of us that lived. I felt like it was a war, honestly.
So if we go back, say, to the subject of authenticity, how was this experience and the connection to the body led you to living a more aligned and authentic life? What is authenticity for you?
Well, authenticity is being the real you. It's your innocence. It's allowing your truth to come forward. So just being who you are. And we're so buried with a lot of ego. Our ego takes over us, and a lot of different things obstacles that come into our psyche that prevent us from feeling our feelings. So authentic is just being who you are.
Mm-hmm.
and just being who you are. But that's really a hard thing to do for people, to be who they are
Mm-hmm.
and their truth. So rising to your higher power and learning how to get in touch with your sacredness, your divineness. This is authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Authentic is compassion. It's reaching out to others and seeing people. That's authentic, and really seeing them and not being selfish.
And
That's
what were the biggest challenges you had on your path towards authenticity? And of course, like, authenticity is something that carries us throughout our life, but what were your biggest challenges showing up?
there were many challenges. I had, of course, the challenges within my family, not being accepted for who I had become. Because when I came out of that hospital, and as I grew up, I started to have a different way about me. Is something came into me that made me a little unique in the spiritual way. I was a spiritual person at that age, which a lot of people become spiritual when they start taking classes. But that spirit came out very strong, and that was one of my challenges, that being accepted, and because I was liberated in my own mind. So this being authentic, being liberated, not so much being a free spirit, but liberating your thoughts. These are your thoughts. Do you liberate them? Do you bring them forward? And this is authenticity. And my challenges were many. And then with men over the years too, being exposed to different abusive men, and just having to be something that everybody wanted me to be, that I wasn't, because I was being me, the authentic me.
Yeah.
And that was the only way that I knew, because that was, I guess you can call it survival, but I don't look at it as survival today. What I look at it as, I recreated my life. I created me, who I wanted to be. And people would say survival, but to me, that sounds like you're still surviving. You have to get away from that word survival. You're not surviving anymore. You're recreating your life. You're created a new person. You're living. And that's the authentic me. And I had many challenges with people, because a lot of people didn't accept me for who I am. My family did. They still think she's,
all the tags that people put, right?
Yes.
When you start showing up and voicing up, and not to prove anything, but just being yourself, challenges people.
Well, for example, our presidential candidate running, Marianne Williamson, I had interviewed her back in 1990 when I got on the path of interviewing people that wrote spiritual books and things.
Yeah.
And she has that same thing. Everyone's like, oh, she's a woo-woo. Why is she running for president? Oh, she's weird. She's a spirit. And that's the kind of labeling she is getting. That's the kind of labeling I got growing up. Like, ooh, she's a woo-woo. What is she doing? What kind of, and so, but I stuck with my power, because remember, I had the experience that was what I created, the self-love, my self-love, and the relationship that I have with myself. No one can interfere with that. Now, a lot of people say they have a relationship with themselves, but it does get shattered, and people do take your power. So
in relationships and
in general, the relationship with yourself, people, letting people walk on you, having healthy boundaries rather than wall boundaries. The boundaries are important, but we have to keep working on ourselves so that we shine forth more.
Yeah. And I would love to hear you speak about the Tantra and Tantra with oneself, and like relationships, and all of that, like your whole background. We had spoken about that the sexual armor that you were telling me. So let's speak a little bit about the sexual armor that people encounter just before becoming intimate with themselves.
Well, armor is not only sexual, it's throughout your body. But if we have unexpressed emotion, which lives in the muscles of the body, and a massage doesn't get rid of it, yoga doesn't take it away. There's a certain orgonomy breath that Dr. Wilhelm Reich was the founder of, this orgonomy therapy, which what I practice. And it's like a lot of de-armoring. He says that the orgasm is only as free as the breath. So if you don't have good breath, it means you have armor, which means that you're disconnected from your belly breath to your chest breath. So what we practice is teaching people how to de-armor, and it begins in the pelvis. That's the first area. Well, really the eyes, and then the pelvis. Because when I was growing up, and I had some physical traumas and things over the years. And I couldn't feel myself. And I thought, my heart hospital experience and all these things, I never really, I had consciousness, I had wisdom, but I couldn't feel myself. And I wanted to study an acting class. And my teacher said, you have to cry. And I'm like, I've never cried. The last time I cried is when I was in the Children's Heart Hospital, wanting to go home and watching all those kids die. So I found this therapy to de-armor, and this is what I practice. And this has saved my life. The sexual armor is keeping you numb in that area from freely expressing verbally, physically, emotionally, what you're feeling, what you want. Once the armor starts to open and we start doing inner child work and we connect you and de-armor we bring forth the emotions that weren't expressed and allowing you to come forth and relive them, and thus creating a new you.
Releasing, unleashing.
Releasing, unleashing. So, you can call it emotional cleansing, emotional release, but it's definitely something that is much more than a release. It's a rebuilding as well, and a recreating. You're not just releasing, and because that may make you feel empty, but what we do is we do a whole where you're actually recreating, being witnessed. Having the witness there is very, very important for this healing.
Being seen.
So armor has a lot of shame. People that have armor, there's this toxic shame and hiding. And if toxic shame and hiding if shame is toxic, it can affect you on many levels of your life. It can affect the chemistry of your body, and it freezes your nervous system. So it keeps you in that flight, but in a frozen. So we need the fright and flight, but will keep you in an area of being frozen. So the toxic shame is the beginning of where the armor starts. And shame could be anything. It's not necessarily sexual. It could be, maybe the kids bullied you in school, or maybe you wore a different outfit and everyone made fun of you and now you have shame, or you cut your hair a certain way. That means you wanted to be yourself and you couldn't.
Yeah, totally.
So we lose the authentic, the innocence, when everyone judges us and we worry about what they think. And our parents try to shape us. You have to wear these kind of clothes. You have to do that. And you have to study this. So we're really being controlled by everyone. But if you can learn how to make a step back from and coming back into the self-love of yourself and really discovering you and recreating your own power, staying with that, this is one step to authenticity.
And you spoke about relationships too, and the dance between like two persons. And of course it starts with each person doing his or her work before, right? Like, talk a bit about relationships and like how to create this passion, intimacy, and like this dance between two people from your background and perspective.
Well, in the sacredness of a relationship, any relationship has the dynamics of push and pull. There's always the dance of push and pull. And instead of what happens in relationships today is people, they let go, they don't even practice the push and pull. They just split off. They split. If they're split from themselves and they have a lot of armor and shame, they would rather hold a grudge, and they would rather just, I'll see you 3 months from now, to a mate, or be mad at their husband or wife for 3 months. And I've seen this where they don't talk. Instead of doing that, what we create is this temple within your body and coming back to yourself. And this is called the Tantra temple, where two people have this dance of pushing and pulling and coming together and separating, coming together and separating. And in this dance is where you're able to deliberate and come together and see what it is that you need to make changes in your relationship about yourself. But then you step back and you come back into yourself, your power, your innocence, and you check in with you. And this is what people are lacking. They're looking for other people feelings to complete their own, instead of their own feelings to complete them. So what I'm asking you to do is to come back in and take that time. And this is what we do in Tantra. We teach people how to have the balance of giving and receiving, and to practice these things. Communication, very important. how to understand, at least to communicate, and not just by texting, but by communicating verbally with your partner with affection, using words of thank you, I appreciate, I honor you for doing this. Really honoring a partner is very important in your growth and coming back to your authenticity. Because honoring someone is not giving your all. It's holding someone in reverence and having this power, not looking up to them like they're your completion. That's not what it's a heart thing. It's really a heart thing. And that is an important part. So this dance of push and pull needs to be there, but it doesn't need to go to the point of holding grudges for months. And so we have to look at ourselves. We have to monitor our feelings, emotions, talk to yourself. And
it I have a subject coming to my mind. I love what you're saying, like holding somebody like in reverence and like honoring them. It's there's a quality of presence that comes with this. It's not trying to change anything, it's just holding them for who they are.
Right. Without, you don't want to change your partner. Your partner isn't going to change. What people do is they adapt, they adjust. There's this period that you meet someone new in your life, but you have differences. So you take steps toward adjusting, adapting. And even when you and your mate are together for many years, you're always changing. One might be splitting off from that because they can't adjust to your changes. Adjustment and adaptation is a very important part of the dance of love. So coming back and adjusting. Hey, your partner is took on a new job, and there's new things about him or her that are, or maybe there's something that they grew in their lives, and you feel left back. So you adjusting to their new growth or whatever it is. There's many things. There's always going to be changes, but adaptation and adjustment are the keys to the dance of love, coming back and forth with your partner. But the giving and receiving is very important. Monitoring that as well, allowing yourself to receive, allowing yourself to give, but seeing that if you can find a balance there. But you have to, again, be conscious, come back to your self-love. And some people are not conscious enough to realize that they don't have these elements in their relationship. So start off by reading books. Start off by watching YouTube videos and having that awareness is a start.
Thanks. And I have the question around desires. Like part of the tagline of this summit is, live in alignment with your deepest desires. What would you say about desires? Because desires, they can be perceived or interpreted in so many ways, right? But from your background, like what is a desire and what is the deepest desire for a person?
Well, the quality of your life determines the quality of your relationships. Quality of your life determines the quality of your relationships. Desire is freedom. Now, desire, most people think of desire as sexual, and it is, and desire for food. How about when you're hungry for all those good foods, desire. Desire is an important part of expression. Not necessarily, I think people put a shame on it when it's sexual. Oh, you're desiring to have 2 women in bed instead of 1. I mean, or whatever. And so the thing is, or having a new experience, and it's all okay to have these things. Of course, everything's done with, there's communication, there's trust, whatever it is that you're doing. But I think desire is truth, and desire needs to be there to continue to stimulate your emotions, to open up your heart, to keep the passion alive. But it needs to be directed. It needs some resiliency around it. It needs to be directed. You can't just have a desire for everything. You see something you want, oh, I think I'll just buy this new car. I have such a desire, but no money to buy it. So you have to have, put the brakes on in certain ways. In other words, just have a little boundary around your desires. But I believe desire is an important part of my growth, because desire is a word that I use for, I desire to go to the park today and ride my bicycle. I desire that. When I desire that, I'm connecting to sexual energy in the body. I'm connecting to energy, and my whole energy becomes one. This is the alignment. The sexual energy needs to align with the spiritual, the emotional, the physical, the mental. And we don't want to neglect that or negate that energy, because that's your healing energy. That's your love energy. That's releasing your shame. So I desire is a nice way to say that you want something. I desire for a holiday gift, a new dress, or I desire to go to a nice Caribbean island and lay out in the sun for a week. I desire that. But again, there's a taboo around desire because it's always about sexuality. And I think that we need to, look at that and understand how you're using the word. Of course you desire.
And there's a taboo in spirituality too. Many spiritual schools just cut desire off, right?
They do, because, in yoga, now I'm a vinyasa yoga teacher as well. And, I've studied yoga. I'm a dance therapist, psychotherapist, all of those things.
Yeah.
Which make up me, the somatic psychotherapist and Tantra. But I'll say something, when I first started to study yoga, it was very, I thought it was very linear, and it was cutting off the desire of feeling, but again, people are so afraid of their sexual feelings. They're afraid of feeling sex. They're afraid of sex. They're afraid of the word. And yet they're all in hiding, in shame, watching pornography or whatever, what have you. But the thing is, if you connect a little bit to the energy of the body, it becomes one. And it's not going to be out of bounds. It's not going to be shameful. It's not going to be displaced or anything like that. So in certain programs, such as yoga, they want you to be free of desire. But if you study Tantra yoga, it's about opening desire. But then again, once you go to Tantra classes, white Tantra in the very beginning, it's about letting go of the desire for sex, because everyone comes to Tantra thinking sex.
Yeah.
But if you come thinking sex, you're not going to connect to the higher power. So Tantra is about, working the Eightfold Path, pranayama, getting to that higher power where you're not coming in with that sexual energy, so that you can learn to cultivate and contain the riches. And once you start to contain that, that's how you get your power. That's how you get your authenticity, because we're constantly depleting, giving it away, just wanting to get it out, or feeling that moment, just that moment of a high, a pleasure for a moment, but it's not long lasting. So then again, coming back to understanding where the desire begins and how to use it.
Yes, an energy circulating inside and cultivating the energy instead of rushing it out.
Yes, there's this energy in Tantra. It's all about sustaining and cultivating sexual energy, because the reason you want to do that, especially for men, men can last longer. They can have more potent and multiple orgasms like a woman. So the whole thing with men, they generally like to, release quicker than a woman, and it's much more easier for them. But they're constantly depleting, because it's abusive. It's abusive to the body to just constantly and want to always deplete. But for a woman, she needs to learn how to contain, so that she can feel more empowered, more enlightened, and more in control of who her sexuality, of her being, of her authentic being. This is where your authenticity begins, is understanding your sexuality, understanding that being that part of you that is sacred, and it is sacred. And so coming, with this energy and learning how to live it freely, making love to life.
Yeah, it's very profound, and I think it's very required to bring that knowledge and to give space for this to happen for people.
Yes, having, taking out the time. Today, this whole thing with, yoga and Tantra is a yoga, is really, really popular. And people are starting to awaken more to the subconscious part of their body, that's the shame. But because they want to feel their sex more, they want to open up to a higher power of it. But again, it's not about having the sex that's going to heal you. It's about coming inside and understanding your desires, and opening up and understanding, addressing the shame, the toxic shame that's there, because the armor is what's blocking your feelings, your subconscious feelings. And once we get into the armor, opening that, then you're going to be very liberated. But again, you have to know about these things. And you know what? You can just, there's so much out there in the world now to find places to study in your town, your city. And it's just amazing how much is available now for us to recreate, liberate our lives.
Yeah. And do you feel like when you were growing up as a kid, you had access, you spoke about your childhood, but do you feel as a young kid, you had access to this wisdom just before getting sick, for example? Because the sickness came and was hiding something. It was protecting you from something. Were you tapping into this as a young kid, and at one point like something became so taboo that it shut down? It's just to give awareness to parents. This is why I'm asking this question for mothers who are watching,
Right. Well,
to be able to, to hold that space and to give that space for children to not shut their sexuality from a young age, because there's so much around this. And what I mean by sexuality is sexual energy. It's like just circulation of that primal energy in them.
right, the primal energy. Well, for me, I say that I had another awakening when I was, my mother was pregnant. She, I don't know, there was some kind of conflict between her and my father that she wanted to have an abortion. And they were not legal in 1956. And so my mother tried to abort me. Like they did it on their own then. They would put medicine or poisons and different things. And my mother did that. That's why I had rheumatic fever, believe it or not, because my immunity was down. Because she had tried to, I love my mother dearly, and I'm so glad she gave me life. And so I guess I'm not for abortion. So, but the thing is, I am and I'm not, but that's another topic. But when my mother tried to abort me, I said, well, Mom, what happened? She said, I put all that poison up you and you just wouldn't go. And I said, well, that was very profound. That was me saying I wanted life. And here I came into the world. And from then on, I felt like it was a miracle. And I became distant and I start living in my own, parents need to look at their children. If their children spend a lot of time alone, say in the bedroom, or if they're distancing themselves from the family, from the crowd, say, like not interacting as much, or if the child is very expressive and creative and emotional, and not to dismiss it in any way, at least look at it and ask the child what they're feeling, what's going on. Never look at any, because see what happens is we dismiss something in another for something that we could have had and we didn't have, or something we don't have. And so we don't want to see it. We don't want to see someone high and expressive and laughter. We'd rather just put a lid on them. It's so much easier to accept yourself. So a lot of mothers and fathers do this to their children, which my mother did that to me because she couldn't express herself and have her feelings and have her life. And she constantly dismissed me and put that lid on me. And I had to do so much work in digging myself out because I understood it after when she told me the story that I was in the womb and I was about to be aborted. And then all of a sudden I came. So, and then when I went to the hospital is when I really had my time.
Your space. It was your space.
And I must have subconsciously as a child, kids will subconsciously get sick. They will find ways to not go to school. And, and maybe on some level, my spirit just overtook me and said, you need to be out of this environment. It's time for you to go alone. And we're going to do some work with you. And then we're going to send you back in the world. And my parents never really understood anything. They always looked at me as I was different or I was not like the other kids. And I was, but I was just authentic. I wanted to be me because that's the only way I lived from a dying disease. But I would say to mothers, if your child is expressive and open, to try to find out, support that in them. And, watch them and take an analytical eye as to where they're going with that. They may turn out to be some great rock and roll star or something, and be some singer, something that's really outrageous. And you may miss that opportunity for them because you think you have so much shame yourself, you're dismissing them. That could be their life, what's coming.
Yeah, to not shame the kids for who they are, really to give that space. for expressivity and energy to flow, and for parents to look at their own stories, right? I mean, like, to be responsible in that sense of bringing that self-love.
Well, they need to work on themselves, but a lot of people, parents, don't realize that they have to.
Yeah.
See, this is the key, is getting people to realize there needs to be a lot more intervention and in-service in schools or for parents to enlighten and enrich parents to understand that there's another part of themselves that they may not have discovered yet, or there's another part of themselves that that hasn't lived. And a lot of people have discharging anger, and they're dismissive, and they're projecting, and the kids suffer, really. And the kid could be something great and famous, and because of that, they may have to go by the wayside, because those things affect people. Unless something comes, you know, some spirit comes out of them and they become like some big famous thing, or whatever it is, their talent really comes forth. And if it's a creative talent, but it could be anything, and this could set them back because the parents are, but we need more intervention for parents so that they can cultivate awareness.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. It's very rich. You have a free gift for our audience, and it's called Live Free. Can you please speak a bit about, you know, what it contains, what it's about?
Live Free, it'll be an ebook for you. It's a book I wrote. I started it many years ago in California, 20 years there, but when I came back to the East Coast, Philadelphia, in 2008, I decided to publish it. And it just talks about all of my experiences. My children's heart hospital, the womb is where it all started. And how, I mean, it sounds like we all start in the womb, don't we? But really, one of the things that cured me was comic relief. I always found things to laugh at, you know, about myself, actually. And when people ridiculed me, and in my book, in the opening, I say, this book is dedicated to those of you who ridiculed me, who hurt me, who raped me, who abused me, who loved me, who cared for me. So I give the positive and the negative. And because without all of that, I would have never learned. And I needed to take that ridicule. I needed to take that love. I needed to take that hate. I needed to take that compassion. And I needed, and there were always people, there were always the opposites coming together. And so I wrote the book about just talking about all of my experiences, and then how I got into Tantra and some work about that, and exercises. I have some exercises in the back, and that people can find, they can do on themselves, or find a practicing person that can help them, a shaman or someone, or a counselor. But there's stuff they can apply to themselves. So it's a book, and it's free, and it'll be there for you once you connect with us here.
Awesome, thanks. So Live Free book, just click on the link on the same page as this video, and you'll get into this world of living free and self-love and her story. Thanks so much for sharing, Anita, the wisdom and your life path. And I'm sure like the audience received a lot from you. And
the title, Live Free, that last part, I mean, the reason I came up with that title is because I feel like that I really do live free. And I'll tell you, the way I live free is because I am me, and I'm authentic. And it's only me, that no one can get between me and my inner child. That's the authentic. Yes. So there's the book for you. Yes, I'm so glad to be here, Jennifer. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anita. And keep on watching the show. There's many experts on this series, a lot of them bringing their own taste, wisdom, gifts, everything combined in here. So keep enjoying. All right, and thanks a lot again, Anita.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.